Hello all and welcome back to this new lecture on views. By the end of this lecture, you will get to understand that what are views, why do we use it, what are the different methods of using views, and what advantages we get upon using it. So before we get started with the topic, please consider dropping a like below and subscribing to the channel so that we stay motivated bringing this kind of topic to you. Okay, so I am on my PG admin tool where I am going to use this payment table for the demonstration purpose within this lecture. This payment table contains all these columns like payment ID, customer ID, staff ID, etc. And before we go ahead and try to understand what are views and try to look into the theory part of it, let's have a look into these couple of SQL queries over here. So pay attention to this piece of code right here, ignoring the other part on the top. So it says select everything from the payment table where the customer ID should belong to these 5 customer IDs. These are the top 5 customer IDs from the payment table in descending order, and in this SQL query I want to fetch all the records where the customer ID belongs to this customer ID group. If I execute it, I will get the output as expected containing all the customer IDs belonging to the group that I have specified over here. And now let's pay attention to this piece of code where I'm trying to create a view using the following SQL query below. So I'm saying create view, which is a syntax to create a new view, and I'm naming my view as my view. Create it as this following SQL query. So I'm saying whatever information I'm getting by using this piece of code, which is right down here, restore all the information within this view that I have created or I'm going to create. So if I'll select and execute it, I'll get a message that query returned successfully in this much of time. Now let's try to use this view that we have created. So within this syntax, if you will notice, I'm using this view exactly the way we use a table in the database. So I'm saying select everything from the view that I have created, which is my view. If I will select and execute it, it will return me exactly the same information that I was getting by using this piece of code over here, which means this view that I have created, it is referencing to this SQL query that I am storing as a view within this view that I am creating over here, my view. Let's have a look at the theory part because now it will make some sense to us. It says views are database objects created over an SQL query. So we need to understand that views are nothing but a pointer which is referencing to the SQL query that we used while creating this particular view. Also, it says it does not store any data, it acts as a virtual table. Now it is very important that we understand this particular thing because very often you will be asked within the interview that how come views are virtual tables, and you will have to define virtual tables or give some explanations for it. So try to understand this. We have this payment table over here, and the information that we get using this SQL query from this payment table, this table is actually storing all these information physically on my computer system, which means all the information that we see by using the payment table, it is actually stored inside the disk that I have within my computer. However, this view that we are using, exactly the way we use any other table, this view is not storing any data physically on my computer. All it is doing is it is referencing to this SQL query, and this SQL query is pointing out to this payment table which is actually physically stored on my computer. And this is why views are nothing but a virtual table that does not store any data physically on the device. Okay, so far we have understood that views are database objects created over an SQL query, and they also don't store any data physically because they act as a virtual table. But the point is, what is the reason that we are using views? So as you can see over here, it provides encryption over the underlying table. So let's say within my organization, I have few colleagues who needs to keep on checking the data from the different tables in the database, and they need a read access for that. However, I don't want them to mess with the data stored in the underlying table like payment table over here, and I want the security for this data. In that case, I can create a view and pass it to my colleague who needs to keep on checking the info stored in the database, and by this way both our needs will be satisfied. For me, I will get the encryption, and for my friend or my colleague, he will get to see the information stored within the database. Now there are also ways by which you can manipulate the information stored within this physical table with the use of a view, but we are not discussing that at this moment. Moving on, it also simplifies working on complex SQL queries. So let's say at my work, I created an SQL query which is, let's say, 6 to 8 lines long, and I understand that I'm going to need that piece of code frequently going forward with my work, but I'm not willing to write that long code again and again over the time. In that case, I can store the entire SQL query within a view, and it will give me the convenience or simplification of using the complex SQL query. Alright, so we have seen how to create a view and how to use it. And let's say after creating a view, you want to make some modification with the construction of this view. And let's say within this SQL query, you don't want to call all the columns from the payment table, and you want to specify 2 to 3 specific columns that you want to see in the final output for the view. Or let's say even if you want to rerun this query that is creating the view, if you do that, you will get to see an error. It will tell you that the view already exists and it will not let you rerun this query or to make any modifications with it. But it is quite obvious that after creating a view, you might feel the need of making some changes with the structure of this view. In that case, what will you do? So please pay attention to this piece of code over here. Here I am not saying create view, but I am saying create or replace view. This will check if the view already exists. If yes, it will do some modification. If not, it will create a new view from scratch. And I'm saying create this view. Okay, let's name it as my view 1. And I'm creating it as select these 4 specified columns, which is payment ID, customer ID, staff ID, and amount from the payment table, where the customer ID belongs to this group. Let's select and execute it, and it has been successfully executed. If I'll go ahead and try to fetch the information from this view, let's change it to my view 1, and it will give me the expected information containing all those 4 columns that I specified within my view construction. Now remember this, that after creating a view, you cannot change the data type for any column, or you can also not change the order of the column. So let's say you want to bring this customer ID column in front of the payment ID column. You will not be able to do that, and you also won't be able to rename a column. All you can do is, by using this create or replace view, you can add new columns at the end of this view. But with the existing view information, you won't be able to change the data type or rename a column, or also rearrange the order of the column. However, there are different methods to do these things. So let's see over here with an example. So with the help of this SQL query, what I'm doing is I'm using this alter view command on my view that I've created. I should rename it to my view 1, and I'm saying rename the column amount that we have by the end, and I'm renaming it to paid. So if I'll select and execute this statement, then it should rename this amount column into paid column. It has been executed successfully, so I am going to select the information from the view that I have modified, and as you can see, the amount has been changed to paid. I can also rename the entire view with the help of alter view command, and we will call it like this: alter view my view, and rename it to, let's say, okay, first of all I have to add one over here as well, and I want to rename it as my view underscore final. Okay, now select and hit execute, and it has been executed successfully. Now if you try to execute this SQL query, this will give you an error because the view name has been changed, and as expected you get this error. However, if I use this new name for the view, then I will definitely get the same output that we were getting from the old view, and there we go. And yes, you guessed it right, if you want to drop a view which is no longer in use, you simply execute this statement, drop view, and then you mention the view name which has been changed now, so I'll use this one. And before dropping this view, I would like to also show you that where does the database stores the view information. So if you pay attention to the left hand side, first I will refresh this database so that it can refresh all the information. Then I will go into schemas. At the bottom we have this view section. If I will expand this, then I will get to see all the views that I have within this database. If you pay attention, we have this my view final that we modified by the end, and the my view that we created by the starting of this lecture. So let's say I want to drop this view named as my view final. So I will select this query and hit execute. It has been executed successfully, but still we get to see this view over here. So all we need to do is on the top, we need to refresh the database. Upon refreshing, you would not see the view again that you have deleted. So we are left with this my view only. So before we close this lecture, couple of more things that you need to understand about views. That any new column added to the underlying table of the view, which means the way we created my view with the help of payment table, if you are making any changes by adding a new column to that payment table that may not reflect on the details of the view, it means that let's say you are creating a new view named custom and you are creating this custom view on the top of the table payment, and let's say you are making some modification to this payment table by adding a new column, and you are also adding new records to this payment table that we are using to construct the custom view. And after making these changes, if you try to see the details of the custom view, it might not reflect the details for the newly added column, but it will reflect the details for the newly added records. So this is a property of views. Secondly, you should never create a view using multiple tables. Let's say by combining the payment table and customer table and applying a join, you want to create a view. That is not a good practice. And you should also avoid creating a view by using with clause or window function, distinct function, or a group by clause. Yes, so far we have not covered the topic of with clause or window function, but we are going to cover it very soon within this playlist. However, as a key point to remember that you should not be using these things in order to create a view, because this might make you face problems or errors going forward working with the views that you are creating. So that is all for today's lecture. I hope you got to understand the concept of views in an intuitive way. If you still have any confusions around it, please consider watching this lecture one more time, because it is actually a conceptual topic in SQL and very important as well that the interviewers will focus most of the time. So watching this lecture couple of more time will be a good practice. And if you found this video helpful, please do not forget to hit the like button and subscribing to the channel, and I will see you in the next lecture.